The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to creating conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Monday, April 14th, and I'm Mark Ross, retired managing partner of PwC and president of the City Club Board of Directors. It is my honor to introduce our speaker today, United States Congressman Ro Khanna from California's 17th District in the heart of Silicon Valley. The last time the Congressman joined us at the City Club, it was 2018 to discuss the future of work. While much has changed since then, historic polarization in our politics remains persistent. The arrival of a second Trump presidency, fueled in part by these political divisions, has the Democratic Party, and many would argue even facets of the Republican Party, on uneven footing. In a New York Times op-ed published in February, Congressman Khanna stated, quote, "Either the country will continue to succumb to burn-it-all-down political nihilism and disillusionment, or Democrats can use this moment of crisis to reframe the terms of the debate." He followed that by raising the important question, how do we begin then to build a transformational instead of a transactional politics? Today we are here to better understand Congressman Khanna's perspective on these topics, tariffs, and the economy, all of which underpin a vision for America that the Congressman calls a new economic patriotism. Congressman Khanna is currently in his fourth term as the representative for California's 17th Congressional District. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee as ranking member of the Subcommittee on Cyber, Innovative Technologies, and Information Systems. As a leading progressive in the House, the Congressman is working to restore American manufacturing and technology leadership, improve the lives of working people, and advance U.S. leadership on climate, human rights, and diplomacy around the world. We have a lot of ground to cover today and several important questions. In this pivotal moment, will America continue down a path of political division? Or will we unite around a shared patriotic vision of economic prosperity? And if so, how? If you have a question for our speaker, you can text it to 330-541-5794, and the City Club staff will try to work it into the Q&A portion of the program. Now, members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming back Congressman Ro Khanna.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your leadership and putting the questions before us so well. It's great to be back here in Cleveland, the place my wife, Ritu, was born and raised. 9 years of marriage has taught me one thing: hope springs eternal in this town for the Cleveland Browns. And I'm really honored my brother-in-law, Neil Sethi, is here. He's not just an accomplished business leader, but an accomplished musician. He and his family never miss a game, and so I realize that if the game doesn't go well, the week doesn't really start till Tuesday or Wednesday. I also appreciate Senator Turner being here. Everyone wants to picture with you, Geraldo. Big buzz. And family members, Aditya, Vibha, Vinod, Sachdeva. Yes, I have a lot of family in Ohio. And I'm also, of course, have to mention how proud I am of my in-laws, Monty and Usha Ahuja. I'm proud of their contributions to Cleveland's education and healthcare, proud of their story that is a testament to the American dream. Now, for those of you who think that I'm too far left And the Ohio Republican Party has already put out a statement saying that, let me assure you, every Thanksgiving, my father-in-law tries to talk me out of those positions. It's not for his lack of trying. 57 years ago, Robert Kennedy stood right here in this club and spoke about a nation divided, not just based on politics and race, but economic neglect. He said then, when you teach that those who differ from you threaten your freedom, threaten your job, threaten your home, threaten your family, then you also learn to confront others not as citizens, but as enemies. Not to be met with cooperation, but with conquest. Unfortunately, Kennedy's words have meaning still today. The eat the dogs, eat the cats chants in Springfield. Like in 1968, America is divided, not just by party line, but by economic fault lines that have shattered communities across this state and across this country. Look, on one side, you have thriving financial and technology hubs, places like where I represent, Silicon Valley. And we're winning on technology, way ahead of Japan, ahead of Europe, even ahead of China. My district has $12 trillion of value. At least it used to, depending on the stock market these days. But it does, with Apple, Google, Tesla, NVIDIA, all in the same district. Many young people think that their future is limitless. But there's a different side, a broken side to the American story. Manufacturing towns, places like Warren, Ohio, where I just was yesterday, and Johnstown, Pennsylvania, that built the steel that won World War II, have seen their greatness diminished by decades of disinvestment. The promise of prosperity, once woven into the very fabric of American life, now feels like a distant memory for too many. Consider this. In the 1980s, America ranked 53rd in income inequality. Does anyone know what we rank today? 128th in the world. China is in the 70s. The top 10% own 50% of the wealth in America. The bottom 50%, 2.6%. And paychecks have gone up over the last 50 years by 15%. But I don't have to tell you, college has gone up 1,000%. Childcare, 200%. Housing, 500%. These numbers are not just statistics. They're not just explanations for why people are so angry at the unfairness. They are the story of a country drifting apart. Franklin Roosevelt warned of economic royalists, men who amassed wealth, rigged the rules, and tightened their grip on power. That ideology is back. Peter Thiel, I've known him for many years, a mentor and benefactor to Vice President Vance, and an early collaborator with the PayPal mafia, with Elon Musk, argues, and you need to listen to this, argues, quote, democracy itself is the problem. I no longer believe freedom and democracy are compatible. To Thiel, the more democracy expands, the more the public demands concessions from capitalism. And that, in his view, hinders innovation. Democracy, he says, is too slow, too cumbersome, too messy for America to stay ahead of China. And what era does he idolize? The 1920s, the Roaring '20s. Of course, they gave us the radio, the automobile, the television. The time he says America was truly optimistic. I guess the question I want to ask him is, does he realize how that decade ends? Perhaps he forgot the Great Depression, the rise of Hoovervilles and breadlines. It happened because Andrew Mellon, the Elon Musk of his generation, was the Treasury Secretary. And he convinced President Hoover to slash government, seeing it as an obstacle to the ambition of great enterprising men. Government itself was the problem, said Mellon. He was convinced prosperity would trickle down. Sound familiar? That the strong would lift the weak. Mellon and Thiel see democracy itself as a burden, believe workers should follow the dictates of a visionary elite, that government should make room for an aristocracy of talent that can lead the way. Of course, they happen to be the aristocracy of talent. This subversive narrative is as old as the Republic itself. The railroad tycoons peddled it in the 19th century as they strangled competition. Corporate executives repackaged it in the 1990s as they outsourced jobs overseas, preaching the gospel of comparative advantage and promising prosperity for all. Trust us, they said, and too many Americans did, only to be left with a trail of economic ruin and a distrust of expertise. I saw this yesterday firsthand in Warren, Ohio, where Darrell Parker talked about the R.G. Steel mill that closed. Think about it, he's still talking about it 15 years later. And he talked about how households had to be divided, where the spouse and family would stay and the person who was working had to go somewhere else to find work. Divided households. He talked about lives lost to suicide and depression. Lives lost not to war or crime, but to financial despair. And I heard that story when I was in Milwaukee. Quentin, who was working in Masterlock, shut down in 2022. Still the impact of NAFTA. And here's what Quentin said that struck me. He said that his uncle, back in the 1960s, had more economic opportunity than his kids will have today. Think about that. He's saying that an African-American man in Milwaukee in the Jim Crow era will have more economic hope than black youth there today. And when I was in Anderson, Fred Davis showed me a binder. 40 plant closings, Congressman. Can you please see this binder? Every one a story of the heart ripped out of a community. Trump and J.D. Vance railed against this broken system. And people heard them. They were angry. They spoke about the hole in the hull of our economic ship. 90,000 factories closed over the last 25 years. But they offer no hopeful vision, no real solutions for the future. The scriptures teach us where there is no vision, the people perish. Vance and Trump stubbornly cling to 19th century dogma in a 21st century world. No matter how much you want to conquer Greenland or Panama, or build a high fortress with tariffs, you simply can't have James Polk's expansionism and William McKinley's protectionism and expect to win in the 21st century. I appreciate the applause. I'm hoping you'll applaud for when I get to the positive message, too. We've got to first get the critique. I'm trying to be fair to them, fair to what they actually believe. Tariffs, slapped on overnight and suddenly repealed. Some of you saw me on Face the Nation. I couldn't keep track. Are they exempt? Are they not exempt? And back and forth. You really think Mary Barra or Jim Farley at Ford is going to say, yes, let me go to the board and spend billions of dollars when we don't know what the policy is going to be the next day? Many of you are business leaders. That's not how it works. I'll tell you what the tariffs have done. Car prices up between $3,000 and $10,000. Grocery prices up. Construction costs up. The bond market with the yield going high. What does that mean? Interest rates up for your credit cards, for borrowing money for buying a home. And then the nervousness. Just this morning, we had a roundtable with Teamsters and other union leaders, the nervousness of people's retirements. This has been the most chaotic, the most reckless, the most self-inflicted damage that any modern administration has done on the economy in modern history. That's the fact. That's the fact. Indiscriminate tariffs didn't build Silicon Valley. We'll get to what I think did. And they didn't build the Research Triangle, and they didn't build the University Circle here in Cleveland. Think about it. Did the tariffs build University Circle? You know. You know what did? Strategic partnerships. Sound, stable economic policy. And while they're waging economic war on allies, Vance is waging a cultural war on universities, widely acknowledged to be the best in the world. It's the one thing that we're very proud of in America. He called them the enemy. Sound familiar? You know, I found it ironic because his folks gave me a warm welcome to Ohio, saying that I was a socialist, forgetting that I represent the greatest wealth engine of $12 trillion in the history of the world. A lot of things you can call me, but that wouldn't apply. And I was wondering, isn't he the guy who sounds like Mao Zedong? Because they tried this, calling universities the enemy in China in the Cultural Revolution and purging intellectuals. And you know what happened? China stagnated for a decade. Instead of attacking Youngstown State, Cleveland State, Ohio State, how about we lift them up? John F. Kennedy said, there are few earthly things more beautiful than a university. What's sad to me is J.D. Vance is making his own story, that of having it rough as a kid and then getting a credential at Ohio State and Yale harder for other kids growing up here today. You may be young, but the ideas are as old as they come. His tax plan, tax breaks for the people in my district. Silicon Valley will be thrilled. 83% of the tax breaks are going to go to my district, the 1%. Not exactly sure what that's going to do for Ashtabula County or Lorain or Warren. More offshoring, more inequality. They want to slash Medicaid, veterans benefits, food stamps. It's a final insult. First, these towns lost their jobs. Now we want to take their benefits away to provide tax breaks to the billionaires and millionaires in Silicon Valley. We're doing fine. Don't really need those tax breaks. And then his partner, Elon Musk, waging a campaign of mass firings, leaving people wondering, as I got asked all this weekend, are we going to get our Social Security checks? Will basic services be there? 2 weeks ago, a mom hugged me in tears. My 3-year-old, a NICU survivor, now needs home care and a nurse to be able to take him to school. What will happen to him? She asked. There's fear, Elon, in the families you don't see. I've known Elon for 15 years. Lately, it's been a little rocky. I'll save the profanity, but he keeps following and unfollowing me on X. You know, like you do with an X. I'll say this about Elon. He's a tech genius, but he should stick to cars and Mars. Stick to cars and Mars. Vance and Musk want to completely get government out of the way to usher in a new Gilded Age so that corporate elites, particularly tech titans, can take the wheel. I say it's time to turn the tables. It's time to put Silicon Valley in service of America, not America in the service of Silicon Valley. That's why today I'm calling for a new economic patriotism. What we need in this country is a new economic patriotism, not a second Gilded Age. It's about giving citizens the power to shape their economic future. It's not as simply a call for new legislation, though new legislation we will need, or a call for new business investment, though no new private investment we will need. It's a national mission, a rallying cry for all of us, all Americans, to build the economic independence and security together in every part of America. We will only heal the soul of America if we rebuild America. Our economic body must be strong for our national spirit to thrive. It's time for a Marshall Plan for America. If we could do it for Europe, why can't we do it for Lorraine? We need a mobilization across party, across geography, of the kind this country hasn't seen, to rebuild in every congressional district in America. It means fusing Silicon Valley's ingenuity with Ohio's industrial might, integrating the AI and robotics into manufacturing to drive productivity. Let's have silicon and steel, chips and ships, software and hardware to bridge the coasts and the heartland and have a new economic era in this country. Maybe the common work of rebuilding our economy can renew the bonds of citizenship that Robert Kennedy talked about at this club, perhaps giving us new purpose beyond ourselves and the screens that keep us apart. Let me go through a few of the concrete proposals of how we can do this before taking your questions. We need a White House Economic Development Council that will focus on economic growth in every region. Think about what it would mean for Jefferson or Warren if we put just one factory, modern factory there, a new steel plant, a new aluminum plant, one of them there with 1,000 jobs. I'm not just talking about the economics, but how we would transform the hope in those communities. You're telling me we can't do this in this country, in 100 towns across this country? Of course we can. And a White House Development Council should make that the goal, to work with people in these communities to say, what do you want and how are we going to build that to give new hope in these communities? It worked with the CHIPS Act. We had a $30 billion investment. It unlocked $400 billion of private sector investment. Today, all 5 semiconductor manufacturers, Intel, TSMC, SK Hynix, Micron, and Samsung, are here in the United States. No other country in the world has that. We can do this for other industries, and we can do it in factory towns across this country. The goal, national security and local revival. We should have modern empowerment zones, so it's not just manufacturing, but allowing businesses that hire locally to get tax-free loans and tax incentives to hire. You know, Cleveland had one of these empowerment zones in the 1990s, and it worked. It boosts wages by 15% and boosts jobs by 15%. If it could work in Cleveland, and Turner's nodding, it must be saying something right. If it could work in Cleveland, it can work in factory towns and rural communities across Ohio and across this country. And look, we must say, if you build it here, we'll buy it. That's how Silicon Valley was built. So NASA said we need to go to the moon. Intel and Fairchild said, we'll build the semiconductors. NASA said, we'll buy it. It's not just this myth of 2 founders in the garage. That happens. But it was our Defense Department that funded it. It was DARPA that funded it. It was government that bought the products that were built. That's what we need for the Intel factories to be succeeding in Columbus. The policy isn't enough. We're going to need execution. You know, we passed a $40 billion broadband bill, and not one home is connected yet. That's because we need expediting on the permitting. And we need to make sure that the internet service providers don't have a veto on where you can build. Literally, the internet service providers were able to delay the process because they had a 14-step process before someone could build and connect homes. So the money is there, but not one home is connected. You know, instead of business leaders undermining government, We need FDR's dollar a year men and women to help get things done. Instead of dismantling state capacity, we must rebuild competent government and honor the independent service, civil service, instead of just having political hacks and cronies in our government. We settled this in 1883 in the Pendleton Act that Trump and Vance want to repeal. Of course, we need to invest in our workforce. 100,000 new plumbers, electricians, new home care aides, new lab technicians. Every person who wants to should have a skilled trade by the time they're done high school. You know, when I was going to high school, you used to have vocational education. Of course, if people want to go to college, great. But if they want to have a skilled trade, they should also have that opportunity. And let's have 100,000 new digital trades in digital marketing, in data management, in learning how to apply AI. That's why I'm working with OpenAI in my district to set up tech academies in places like Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and across the Midwest. It's why I'm working with tech companies to establish a TechWise program, partnerships with universities, colleges, community colleges, and historically black universities that provide a $5,000 scholarship for kids, 18-month credential. They end up with up to a six-figure job. And guess what? They don't have to leave. I know the problem here. People leaving Youngstown, leaving different towns. You can now do those jobs staying in the community and building economic prosperity. Tariffs aren't going to do that. We've got to figure out how we're going to build economic opportunity in these communities for new technology. Now, economic patriotism also does not mean isolationism. You know, I have a pretty simple view. If we want people to buy our stuff, they need to like us. I mean, you know, usually people don't buy your stuff if they don't like you. We will also build more by working with other nations. Great production comes from great alliances. And it comes from great universities. Through a 100 university initiative. We should have the 100 Factory Town Initiative, 100 University Initiative. Let's invest $100 billion in research and development at leading universities. Think about what that would mean if we did that in Ohio. That's how Silicon Valley was built, with Stanford and Berkeley that propelled Silicon Valley. Why can't we do that in every region in this country with our great universities? Of course we can. It would spawn both manufacturing and services jobs in science, in healthcare. Look, rebuilding manufacturing and the economy also means investing in our greatest asset. Anyone have a guess what that is? Our people. Our people. That's what makes me a Democrat. Our people. Why do manufacturers have to pay $25,000 to pay for people's health care? I mean, how are we going to compete when you're looking at a CEO? They've got to pay $25,000 just to hire someone for health care. And you know what? The thing is that the skyrocketing healthcare costs have meant that the wages have stayed flat. Paychecks have stayed flat because the money goes into the healthcare. We spend twice as much as the next leading country in healthcare, and yet we have the worst statistics when it comes to infant and maternal mortality. Of course, worse for black women, but worse just in general. When it comes to diabetes, when it comes to healthcare. I mean, I don't understand how we keep doing this. We spend the most and we get the worst outcomes. It's time to have Medicare. That means Medicare for all, to lower costs, ensure every doctor is in network, and reduce out-of-pocket expenses for families and businesses alike. And let's talk about it, because the efficiency thing is in vogue. Let's talk about efficiency. Medicare has 2% administrative costs and less fraud than private insurance. By the way, all that nonsense about Social Security, less than 1% fraud. It's the least fraud in the entire federal government. Those are just the facts. And if we want people to rebuild our communities, how about having child care in this country? You know when we had child care? You know when we had universal child care? World War II. You know why? Because it's the women who built America's industry. That's just the fact. The men were, you can clap for that. Men were fighting the wars, and the women, Rosie the Riveter, were in the factories, and suddenly the men who were in charge at the time were like, oh, who's going to look after the kids? I guess we have to build war nurseries. We built 3,000 war nurseries. We had universal child care. The reason we got rid of it back then was not because it cost too much, but there were some men back then, the unenlightened ones, who wanted women back in the kitchen. That's why it ended. California was the last state that kept the war nurseries. If we could have universal child care in the 1940s, we can have $10 a child care, $10 a day child care with workers paying $20 an hour today. We can do that today. 2 more points. You know what the highest return on investment is? It's not AI. It's in our children. James Henkman showed this, University of Chicago, Nobel laureate. It pays for itself. I don't have time to go into all the details, but let me give you one example. In the 1950s, America had 80% of our kids in high school. Great Britain, France, Germany, they had 20 to 30%. High school was for the elites in Europe. America said, it's for everyone. That's why our economy soared. That's how America became the greatest economic engine to the world. Today, we're competing with over 1 billion people in China. I don't understand how every single person isn't for investing in education since a child is born in America and telling them to get as much education as they can. That's the biggest investment we can make in this country. How do we pay for all of this? How about asking billionaires in my district to pay more? You know, they shouldn't have a lower tax rate than the teachers or nurses or professors here. And I've never really understood this, and maybe one of you in the question and answers will explain it to me. I don't understand when the guy who represents more billionaires than any person in the world is saying tax them more, how this is a hard vote for the other 434 members of Congress. If we were to get rid of the tax giveaways for the billionaires and the very rich, and at the same rates that we had in the 1990s, a time of high economic growth in this country, we would raise $5 trillion just by doing that, to be able to fund healthcare, education, childcare for our people. I'm tired of big money and super PACs that are distorting, getting common sense policy. It's why I've not ever taken a dime from PACs or lobbyists and have called for eliminating all super PACs from our politics. Look, let me end with this. At a time we're producing unprecedented wealth, we can afford to provide every American what this country gave me: a good education, quality health care, and a community that cares about your well-being. You see, I want the America that inspired my parents to come here. My grandfather spent 4 years in jail alongside Gandhi, fighting for India's independence movement. My father came here in the 1960s for an education. I won't mention the state, Michigan. And my mother followed soon after. My in-laws probably were wiser. They came around the same time to study at Ohio State. That was when America, despite the divisions, was the place to be. John F. Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon, and we did. We led the world in innovation, in industry, in technology. We were the hope for people's dreams in every place of the world. I was born in Philadelphia in 1976, our bicentenary. I believe in the America my parents came to, one brimming with confidence and humming with activity. If we embrace a new economic patriotism, we can rebuild that America and go beyond, answering Frederick Douglass's call for a composite nation. A nation where the grandson of an Indian freedom fighter can serve in the United States Congress with the grandchildren of those who scaled the cliffs of Normandy. A nation where people of every race, every religion, every continent can spark the most productive time in our country's history. A nation where we will prove to the world that a strong multiracial democracy, which has never existed in human history, will unlock the genius of ordinary people and drive the greatest advances that civilization has seen. My friends, family in Cleveland, let us be worthy of the sacrifices of those who came before. Let us meet the moment. Let us build the most vibrant, dynamic nation the world has ever seen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
We don't get this every day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll do it together. All right. Let's get the questions.
Thank you, everyone. We are about to begin the audience Q&A. For our live stream audience, I'm Mark Ross, President of the City Club Board of Directors. Today we are joined by United States Congressman Ro Khanna from California's 17th District. He is sharing his vision for a new economic patriotism. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, as well as those joining via our live stream at cityclub.org or other media outlets. If you'd like to text a question for our congressman, please text it to 330-541-5794, and the City Club staff will try to work it into the program. May we have our first question?
As the son of immigrants, please tell me how your views of comprehensive immigration reform differ from the current occupant of the White House.
Well, look, first, I believe in due process. Let me say this. I'm all for deporting people who have been convicted of violent crimes. I just want to make sure we know whether they actually committed the violent crime in the first place. That's what the United States Supreme Court said, 9-0. Make sure we have due process. But I think immigration is pretty common sense. You need a secure border. If someone knocks on your door, you want to know who it is before you let them in. We should have a secure border. When people come to this country, they should learn English. They should learn about our history because it's an incredible history. I'll tell you something, as a son of immigrants, immigrant families tend to be very patriotic. My parents didn't spend a lot of time telling me about my rights. They said, go work hard. You won the lottery. You were born in America. Go make something of your life. And I think that that is the spirit that most Americans believe in. Common sense, a secure border, a fair process, due process, and a recognition that immigrants enrich the United States of America.
Good afternoon. My name is Dolores McCollum. I'm a retired social studies teacher from the city of Cleveland.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. You mentioned that you were a Democrat, so in that spirit, I have an observation and a question. The Democratic Party for years has taken for granted its base, been tongue-tied on messaging, and devoid of meaningful and creative strategies. What suggestions do you have to bring your party into the third decade of the 21st century?
Well, Dolores, I appreciate your raising that question. And as a history teacher, you know that Trump stole so much of our themes. We are the party for making things in America. That was FDR. That was John F. Kennedy. We are the party that helped stand up for the working class with Social Security, with Medicare, with overtime laws, with the living wage. What do we need to do? I believe the contrast should be very simple. The contrast should be that they have a 19th century view about how to build economic success in these communities. And they will have had almost 8 years. I mean, they had 4, they're gonna have, unfortunately, these 4 more. Where are the new factories? Where are the new economic activity? What are they actually doing in people's lives? We have to say we understand the future. People don't want to be lied to. They don't want to be told, okay, we can bring every single thing back in the United States. It's just not true. They want a concrete plan. They understand where wealth is being created in technology and finance. We need to say, we understand the future. Here's our vision and concrete plan for how your families, your kids are going to have economic security and economic prosperity in the future. And we need to go to every district, black, white, Latino, and do this. And I believe that's what I think economic patriotism is about. I believe the Democrats will win on the economy because we will have a more concrete, modern understanding of that economy. And that is how we will win back many people who went to Donald Trump, who thought he understands the economy, he knows how to build wealth, but who has done nothing to actually do that. You know, I had someone in Silicon Valley text me and said, you know, we didn't like your candidate, Vice President Harris. I worked all over the country for her. And we didn't like Donald Trump, but we voted for Trump because we thought we'd make more money under him. I said, how's that working out? So, you know, we have an opportunity to be the party that has a real substantive economic vision. And I think that that is going to win back the trust of people who have, who we've lost.
Thank you. I'm Joan Spurl. I'm president of the University of Chicago Alumni Club of Ohio, and like you, am an alumna of the College of the University of Chicago, known for its the value it puts on free speech and its statement of freedom of expression that's modeled at many universities around the country. And it's President Zimmer had been here at the City Club to talk about that a number of years ago. Can you talk about freedom of speech and freedom of expression and how to have civil dialogue, what you learned at the university and in your current role? Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the question. I'm going actually to Yale tomorrow, where JD and I both went to law school, to talk about freedom of speech. Because he's been lecturing Europe about freedom of speech while sitting silently while students are snatched off campus and deported without due process. The reality is, you mentioned University of Chicago, President Hutchins, back in the 1930s at the University of Chicago, stood up to the donors and the business class that wanted him to compromise on academic freedom. And he said, no, what's more important is standing up for freedom of speech. Kingman Brewster did that at Yale, standing up to donors saying, no, I'm going to stand up for those protesting in the Vietnam War and protesting civil rights for freedom of speech. And you have had President Bryant at Harvard do the same thing. I think right now the universities need to find some courage. Our law firms need to find some courage. There are things that matter more than simply the size of one's endowment. We need the presidents to be banding together and standing up for free expression. That is the heart of American democracy. There's a reason it's the First Amendment. And I certainly will continue to speak out very strongly for the First Amendment rights, even of people who I strongly disagree with. And I have done that throughout my career.
Congressman, thank you. My name is Evan Tokatyan. I'm a student at Cleveland State University for Economic and Industrial Development. Two things.
You were supposed to give me the critique on the speech.
Well,
I'm joking around.
It was a great speech.
Question?
It was a great speech. In terms of that Marshall Plan you have, I think I have one written for you.
Great.
And for the White House Economic Development Council chair, I'd like to submit my application. But, my question is, with the Biden infrastructure bill and the CHIPS bill, so much of it was wrapped up in red tape and NIMBYism. What is your view on the abundance movement and kind of the discussions around that on the left?
I'm supportive of it. I think Ezra has written a very important book on abundance. We need to make sure that we're fast-tracking some of the permitting. We shouldn't have restrictive zoning laws that are preventing housing to be built. But we need to look at it more than just fast-tracking permitting and getting rid of restrictive zoning. You're not, even if you did all of that, that's not going to magically redevelop Ashtabula County, Jefferson, Ohio, where you need federal financing. We need a development of the workforce. We need to invest in state capacity, not be firing federal workers. Who's going to help build partnerships and economic development if we don't have competent federal workers? And we need to invest in our universities. So it's one piece of it. But you know we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are three presidents or three leaders, because Hamilton never got to be president, who developed America: Hamilton, Lincoln, and FDR in terms of the model. And they all had private investment coupled with smart government partnerships targeted in every community. And I think if we take that approach and apply it in a modern context with modern technology, so the AI and technology isn't just piling up wealth in my district, but has been deployed to reindustrialize and create economic opportunity everywhere we can. And that, to me, that work is going to help bridge some of the divides in this country. Because when you work together, just like when you play a sport together, you find some mutual respect. And I think we need a common mission in this country. There's a common sense of what can we do? But what about the mission of being a manufacturing superpower and the preeminent economy and revitalizing economic hope and opportunity in every part of America? That seems like a pretty good mission for our time. I think people will respond to it. The last point is, it can't just be people in Washington. It can't just be, okay, Ro Khanna goes and votes for the CHIPS Act. You know, Robert Kennedy, you can tell I'm a fan, he didn't just speak at the Cleveland Club, he spoke at Bedford-Stuyvesant. And he said at Bedford-Stuyvesant in economic development, it's not going to be government just that develops it. It's going to be our faith leaders, our business leaders, our community leaders. It's going to be all of us. I want the Democratic Party to invite and inspire civic activism for all of us to join in rebuilding this nation. I'll tell you what defeats anger in this country and always does: inspiration. And if we inspire the American public with a common mission, we will overcome the propaganda and the anger and the falseness of what Trump and Vance are selling. People are angry. That's why they're looking for alternatives. We need to inspire them with a real one.
Good afternoon. My name is Anju Kapoor. My question is, with the judiciary left toothless, the corruption in the executive branch and much of the legislature, how the fear is that we might be headed for martial law. What can be done to prevent this country from heading in that direction?
Well, you're doing it. You're showing up. The biggest thing we need in this country is for more citizens to be showing up. We had 5 million people out last weekend. There are studies that show if 3% of a country's population mobilize, that's the biggest check on authoritarianism in any nation. I've been going to red districts and town halls, 1,000 people showing up in rural California. We had Robin help plan this in Jefferson, Ohio. I said, Robin, get 10, 12 people together. About last week, he texted me, 100 people are showing up. I said, in Jefferson, Ohio, 100 people? People are showing up. And that kind of organization and mobilization may infuse some courage in the spine of some of these moderate Republicans who are otherwise going to lose their seats. But beyond that, we need to be bold in speaking up. We can't just say, okay, let's just talk about Medicaid cuts and the price of eggs, and if people are being deported without due process, let's stay silent. If people are having their rights violated, let's be silent. We need to all speak up, to find that courage to speak up. And the good news is, there are 2 places where we're having an impact. The Supreme Court, 9-0. 9-0 said Abrego has legal rights in this country. That was a check on the executive totally destroying the Constitution. And then the second is Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, called up Donald Trump. And he said, you can't cut Medicaid. I'm hearing from too many people. And so the Senate doesn't want to cut the Medicaid funding because they're hearing from people. Nothing in this country can defeat active citizens mobilized. And that's what all of you are doing by showing up today. You're patriots for doing that, and I appreciate it. Who's this guy?
Delighted to welcome you back to Cleveland, Congressman. You mentioned Abreu, the Salvadoran man wrongfully deported and now imprisoned in El Salvador. The Supreme Court in the 9-0 vote that you referenced last week said that the president had no right to send him there. The administration must facilitate his return. They have not, as far as I know, up until I sat down, done anything about it. What if they do not? What if they defy the 9-0 Supreme Court? Will that be a constitutional crisis in your view?
Yes, it's a constitutional crisis, and I think that's why the Supreme Court was so careful in how they worded it, because they said, the judge needs to tell them exactly what to do, and they're trying to find some latitude so that it doesn't head to an exact constitutional crisis. But I think that is the danger. Look, you put your finger on it. J.D. Vance has said, if the court rules, the president should tell the court, you've made your ruling, now try to enforce it. That is a very dangerous attitude in this country. And we need people speaking up, even if you disagree with the immigration policy of Biden, and I'm not saying it was perfect, even if you believe that people convicted of heinous crimes, as I do, should be deported, even if you believe that MS-13 gang members should be deported, you have to speak up for due process. And even if you don't agree with the due process, you have to speak up for listening to a Supreme Court in this country. The whole system depends on that. And so you're right, Geraldo, as to point out that that's the red line. Or is the executive branch going to start to defy the Supreme Court? And what we need is not just Democrats, but Republicans willing to speak up and saying, if they go down that line, that's a constitutional crisis, and we have to have all the tools on the table in the action that we will take. But it is Vance and I went after each other on Twitter, and he said, well, it's a fact that this person has no legal rights and an M13 gang member. And his own Supreme Court, with Republican appointees, Trump appointees, is saying he's wrong. And so people need to understand how dangerous it is, what he's doing. And I would never say that about a Mitt Romney or a Paul Ryan, certainly not George Voinovich, who I respected, or Rob Portman, who was wonderful to work with, or Mike DeWine, who came to the defense of people in Springfield. I have disagreements with them, but they all understood that you listen to the rules. It's like if you're losing, the difference is, it's like if you have a bad call against you in football, and instead of just yelling at the refs, you're basically like, no, I'm not going to listen to the refs. That's what's going on. Anyone's entitled to yell at the refs, but you still got to listen to the refs, and they're not listening to the refs. So we have a potential constitutional crisis.
My name's Adam Phillip. I was born and raised here. Thanks for coming out, too, by the way. But actually, I read your piece in Foreign Affairs a couple of years ago on manufacturing while I was on a flight to a conference out in Silicon Valley.
Wow. And someone reads them, so I appreciate it.
I did read it. But I was struck by it. I read it and I said, wow, this guy really gets it. He sounds like he's from Cleveland, which makes more sense now hearing about your family background. But my question is, what do you think your own constituents' appetites are for, say, rebuilding the Warrens and the Youngstowns and the Ashtabeles of the world?
They need leadership. You know what the saddest thing is that you brought Elon Musk in not to build things, but to dismantle things. Imagine if a president had said to some of these technology and finance and business leaders, show up in Lorraine. They'd show up. Show up in Warren. Tell me what you're going to do. I'm doing it on a small scale as a congressperson, getting people in OpenAI to open up an academy, getting technology folks to open up technology certificates, because you're going to need a diverse economy. Of course, you're going to need advanced manufacturing, but you're also going to need technology and services. I believe that we need people in Silicon Valley. They're not going to do it on their own. They're going to, of course, need the proper laws and incentives and regulations, but the biggest thing they're going to need is leadership. This country is desperate for leadership, for people who are going to help mobilize the resources we have. You don't even have to disparage them. Just say, We want you to build it across America what you're building in Silicon Valley. And I believe people will respond to leadership in this country. And that's how I think we start to rebuild America across different geographies.
Thank you very much to Congressman Ro Khanna for joining us at the City Club of Cleveland today. Forums like this one are made possible thanks to generous support from individuals like you. You can learn more about how to become a guardian of free speech at cityclub.org. Today's forum is the annual Craig Spangenberg Memorial Forum, which was created to celebrate Mr. Spangenberg's commitment to the First Amendment rights of all citizens. He was nationally known as a premier trial lawyer, founded and served as the first president of the International Society of Barristers, and was past president of the City Club, where he remained a City Club member for over 50 years. We are grateful to the law firm of Spangenberg, Scheibele, and Leiber for their support. The City Club would also like to welcome guests at the table hosted by Geraldo and Erica Rivera. Be sure to join the City Club on Friday, June 6th at the Mimi, Ohio Theater right here in Playhouse Square. We will host the Right Honorable Dame Jacinda Ardern, the 40th Prime Minister of New Zealand. She will be reflecting on the struggles, triumphs, and experiences that shaped her leadership style in her new memoir, A Different Kind of Power. Tickets are available for this and other forums at cityclub.org. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you once again to Congressman Khanna. I'm Mark Ross, and this forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.